What's up, everybody? We're here on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I hope you are all doing something very fun with your loved one tonight, your Valentine. I'm taking Brooke out to dinner. That's kind of our tradition. Whit and I will do something this weekend when we have babysitters. Whit will take Maverick out. So that's kind of our family tradition, which we like to do. I love being Brooke's Valentine, her first and only Valentine. I tell myself forever, but I know that's not how it's going to end. So thanks for being here with us. We're going to do probably a little bit of a shorter stream today, but I did want to talk about this Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez Reed case because I think stuff is going to start happening. It seems like this Reed trial really could happen next week. You know, I'm always skeptical of trial dates, especially when motions are happening like the hearing today, which is going on where they're literally trying to recuse the prosecutor, which obviously if that happens, then the case is not going to trial next week. So I think there are ways that it can still get continued and get pushed. Possibly, we will have to see what happens. But there's a lot of interesting things going on, and similar to the Crumbly case, this is a little bit more of an outside the box type of charge criminally. When something happened, and we've asked the question: should this be a criminal case? Should it just be civil? Why? What information do we have? What information do we need? And we got some more of that information over the last couple of hearings that have happened. What kind of witnesses are going to be called? What types of reports are going to be used? What types of evidence is going to be used? What may come in? What may not come in? Additional charges against Gutierrez Reed, some demands made by Baldwin's team. So we're going to talk about all that and more today. We're going to talk about how the outcome of the Gutierrez Reed trial could affect Alec Baldwin's case. So we're going to talk about all that. We're going to answer your questions, and we're just going to kind of get prepped and primed for these trials that both may happen this year. I think that there is a good chance that these two trials do come to fruition and actually happen in 2024, which is not something you often say when cases are filed more recently, like Alec Baldwin's was. So hit that like button if you guys have not already. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people on the rewatch crew as the hearing's going on now. It's Valentine's Day. People are busy, so I get it, but I still want to come hang out with you guys. Been kind of a crazy week for me, so I'm still trying to get my bearings and come off the adrenaline crusher that was how my trial got booted again and continued now for months after the miserable start on Monday, where we didn't get a jury and ended up having to strike the whole panel. If you want to check out our video we did on Sarah Boone, at the end, I kind of talk more about that, but I know most of you don't care about that or not here for that, but instead to talk about this Baldwin and Gutierrez Reed case. So let's get into it. First, Gutierrez Reed's trial. That is the armor on the case that Alec Baldwin basically points the finger at, is supposed to go to trial starting next week. They're going to try to pick a jury. Probably be somewhat difficult because of the high profile nature, because of the Rust movie, because of Alec Baldwin, because of all of the notoriety and celebrity surrounding this case. To me, that's going to be an issue. It's going to be difficult to find a jury, but not impossible. Recently, they have also filed additional charges against Gutierrez Reed for tampering. Basically, what it seems like the alleged facts are around that case is she had cocaine on her person, gave it to somebody else, didn't want to be found with the cocaine, and then ended up, I think, asking for the cocaine again later. There's also some allegation that she handled the ammunition while on set, while she was, or in the hotel room, while she was high on marijuana, potentially some text messages with that. One of the defendant's motions was to sever those tampering charges, dealing with the drugs, trying to keep all that information out. The judge denied that motion. So the state is going to be able to argue that. And the nexus the state provided, because basically the defense was arguing, it seemed like the judge may go with this argument that she just got rid of the cocaine because she didn't want to pick up a drug charge. Not because she thought she did anything wrong with the death of Helena Hutchins. People are asking who Gutierrez Reed is. That's the armor on the set of Rust, also charged with involuntary manslaughter. Alec Baldwin is going to be pointing the finger at her and others. But so the defense tried to argue she was just trying not to get a drug charge. Seems like the judge was on board with that. But then the state provided a nexus that the judge found appropriate and is going to allow this argument in trial, that it shows consciousness of guilt, that obviously if you're doing a job like handling ammunition and the ammunition, at least in part, causes the death, you know you could be cooked if you're high on cocaine or marijuana. So you getting rid of those drugs can show your consciousness of guilt, Some of the text messages are going to come in, not all of them, to show she may be handling the ammunition within a reasonable period of time of when she was on set with marijuana and or cocaine. So to me, I could have seen both sides of that argument, but I think it's appropriate for the judge to allow it to come in because I do think that's an argument of negligence. And in the involuntary manslaughter line of thinking, if you are negligent and your negligence caused or even reckless doing drugs while also handling ammunition and somebody ends up dead, obviously I think that could be something the jury could take into account and could be likely to prove or disprove a material fact, which in fact then makes it relevant. So new charges for Gutierrez-Reed that are going to come into her case. Sounds like it's all going to be part of the same trial. If the court needs, or if the defense needs additional information on that, that could be a reason the case gets continued. We'll see. Additionally, Gutierrez-Reed has basically said that the charges against Baldwin, I think, could be an argument on why to potentially continue her case. It also seems like there's been some crossover and some potentially damning text messages that are attorney-client privilege that is the reason and the subject that Gutierrez-Reed's defense team is trying to get the prosecutor booted. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the judge is going to deny that motion. It's happening right now, so we'll have to check back and see what happened. But there is some nefarious things going on, maybe some fault of the defense for allowing the law enforcement to go through the phone, but also some fault of law enforcement from not removing the attorney-client privilege, getting to one of the key witnesses who's going to point the finger saying, that's not my ammunition. Some other way, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed got that on set. So we'll see what ends up happening with those text messages. And then there was also a motion that the state filed to try and keep out the OSHA report, which basically said the entire set was a mess. Everything was out of whack. This is not safe. This is not how it's supposed to be done. So many people dropped the ball. We've talked about this in the past. The production team, Alec Baldwin, security, Gutierrez-Reed, the ammunition company, all sorts of people on set did so many different things wrong that it created a horribly negligent and horrible set that ended up in this tragedy. Gutierrez-Reed's team wants to bring it in to show that it wasn't her fault or just her fault, but in fact, it was that person's fault, this person's fault, that person's fault, this person's fault, all these people's fault. How can you really criminally convict Hannah Gutierrez-Reed? They made arguments that she's the only person the state is trying to blame. The state's like, you're lying. You know we filed charges against the assistant director, producer, and Alec Baldwin, so how can you say that? I can tell you from watching some of these hearings, it is absolutely going to be contentious. There are going to be some personal attacks. There's going to be some nasty exchanges between the prosecution and the defense team in this Hannah Gutierrez-Reed trial. I feel pretty confident about that. So the state wants to keep out the OSHA report for those reasons, and also because they think it does not prove anything. It's going to confuse the jury. It's not necessarily relevant to whether or not Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was negligent and whether her negligence or recklessness caused the death of Elena Hutchins. And also, they make an argument that to me seems very interesting about how this trial is going to go. They say an expert, that some movie producer is going to come in and read the OSHA report and say, haha, see, this is so unsafe. And that tells us a few things. Number one, it tells us that the defense is going to call movie industry experts, movie producers, people who work on sets. That's what we've guessed and figured the entire time. Baldwin's team and Gutierrez-Reed's team are going to call probably different experts. They don't seem to be jointly defending the case in any way. But that is how we determine what the standards are. What's reasonable? You can have an expert on anything. Cutting hair, making movies, whatever it may be. Back injuries, distance perception, speed, accident reconstruction, whatever it may be. You can have experts on it if it's scientific and you can come in and explain why you're an expert and how things work, what the rules are, why people abide by those rules, what's safe, what's not, what are the standards, what are the procedures. And we knew they had to do this in order to create and prove what the standards and procedures are in Hollywood for these people on set. And it sounds like that's exactly what's going to happen. But with experts, they can only use things that are customary and reasonable for experts to use in their field to make these determinations. So the state also argued that movie producers don't use OSHA reports. I thought they could have argued it maybe a little bit more, but they mentioned it. And I think what they were getting at is movie producers don't usually use OSHA reports to determine what the proper procedure is on set. But then the defense argued, well, they're going to talk about safe sets and safety, and this is going to explain why it's not and how it wasn't. The state also, I think, correctly argued that OSHA doesn't make a determination as to who's at fault, especially criminally, so that's going to confuse the jury. But the defense responds with, the expert report's not going to come in. So the hearsay and all the objections to the report, it's not going to come in. It's just basically an expert relying on OSHA's report, but giving their testimony about process, procedure, safety on set. And therefore, the content that the expert testifies to is appropriate. The report may not be. Additionally, it seems like the state was cloaking a Daubert challenge, which is challenging the expertise of this expert or that they can really even testify to anything, because you can't have me show up and say, I see a lot of movies and it looks like this was not a safe set based on these pictures. So therefore, my expert opinion is it's not a safe set. The expert has to aid the jury. They have to do something the jury can't do. Their expertise, their background, their education, whatever it may be, has to add, aid, and assist the jury. Can't just be a common sense discussion. They've got to bring something to the table to explain it to the jury. And at this point, we haven't heard the Daubert challenge yet. I think the judge will probably have to let some kind of Hollywood experts testify to what's proper on set. I think that's appropriate, and that's going to aid the jury and be really important and not something that's just common knowledge. And the judge denied the state's motion in limine, and they're going to allow, it seems, the expert to use the contents of the OSHA report. And we are going to have discussions about what a mess this set was during this case. So how does this all apply to Alec Baldwin's case? Well, if the OSHA stuff and this expert's going to be able to testify to it in Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's case, you can believe that probably going to come in Alec Baldwin's case as well. And you better believe, from Alec Baldwin's perspective, he's going to be pointing the finger at everybody else and not himself. Now, it can backfire. Obviously, he's one of the bosses, one of the producers involved in the companies that are the bosses. So does a mess of a set really help him, or does it make him look more negligent? That may be something that depends on what the jury makeup is. But Alec Baldwin and his team at this point seem very confident. And how are they projecting that? Well, they're demanding a speedy trial. So that means the trial could happen in 2024. Is it surprising that they're demanding a speedy trial? To me, absolutely not. Not surprising at all. Why? Well, they've already dealt with this case the first time it was charged months and months and months ago. They've done their due diligence. They're a private defense team. He's probably paying them enough to focus on this case. They're going to be ready. Now, I think the state will also be ready, since they've had months and months and months since the first time when they dropped the charges and rebrought it with new special prosecutors. So this is the recipe of a case. It's also not the most complicated case in the world. So this is the recipe. Brian Koberger's case was not. I never thought that was going to go within the speedy trial period. But this, to me, is the type of case that could possibly be prepared and tried within a speedy trial period. So we'll see if that's what ends up happening. It seems like that's where this is tracking. And to me, everything they've said publicly and a lot of their public victories throughout the processes of these cases tells me that they are ready. But how will the outcome of the Hannah Gutierrez-Reed trial affect Alec Baldwin's team and their case and how they look at it? And I think there are multiple ways to look at this. Number one, actually, before we get there, let me answer a couple questions. I saw a couple come in. Maria said, "You're Brooke's first and most important Valentine." I like to think so, Maria, and I hope so. Vicky with a Y. "Hey, Peter, just got my Lawyer You Know t-shirts 3. Love your mug, but couldn't bring myself to buy the socks with your face all over them." It is kind of a weird product, but when people send me pictures of them, it's pretty funny. I can't wait. Hopefully post a picture or send me a picture on Instagram of you wearing one of the t-shirts. T-Trees, legal question. What kind of liability waiver is signed upon film production, and how does it factor in the case? So it's interesting. I think different people probably signed different waivers. I'm not sure what Hannah Gutierrez Reed would have signed. I'm not sure what Baldwin or the actors or people that working on set would have signed. I would assume there's a liability waiver, but even with liability waivers, there is often times that you can get around those waivers. Recklessness usually can't be waived. Sometimes negligence can't be waived. If they don't even do what they were supposed to do, it's not like it was a pure accident. And those liability waivers don't apply to the state. The state filing criminal charges, it doesn't matter if liability waivers were charged for the absolute most part. John O'Rourke, could a low budget film be an issue? Misplaced finances and who provided the money? That may be something that they push against Alec Baldwin. And it also may be something that Hannah Gutierrez Reed's team pushes as somebody else at fault. They should have had other people. She should have been an assistant. There should have been more money placed in safety, and there wasn't. They set her up to fail. It wasn't her fault. She did the best she could. Now, doing cocaine and smoking marijuana is probably not great for your argument there that you weren't negligent, but we'll see how that all plays out. And it's interesting. And again, now we're going to kind of get to how the outcomes can affect each other's cases, because you've heard me say, well, this could happen in Gutierrez Reed's case and the opposite could happen in Baldwin's case. So if we think about, let's say Hannah Gutierrez Reed goes to trial and she's guilty. Is that good or is it bad for Alec Baldwin? Well, I think there are multiple ways to look at it. I think it could be bad for Alec Baldwin because the jury's not just seeing this whole thing as an accident where nobody's criminally culpable. They see criminal liability. They see criminal negligence, and they are going to convict people for that criminal negligence, similar to what we saw in Jennifer Crumbley. So that could be bad for Alec Baldwin, but how could it be good for Alec Baldwin? Well, if she's guilty and Holes pled guilty, Alec Baldwin can point the finger at those two people. There are two convicted criminals that acted negligently, and their actions caused this death, not mine. And I'm going to have experts prove to you what the star actor should, could, and would do in my situation. And that's exactly what I did. And I shouldn't be held criminally liable for that. So that's why a guilty verdict could be good for Alec Baldwin. Now, what about a not guilty verdict? First, a not guilty verdict could be good for Alec Baldwin in that the jury just sees this as an accident and they don't feel compelled to convict somebody criminally. Now, it's going to be a different jury, of course, for Alec Baldwin, but I think it's going to give an indication. And I think it's going to give the state an indication because there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people that screwed up. It's a mess of a set. Can the jury not parse through it all and just say, you know what? This is just, it's really sad. It's tragic, but this is an accident. This is civil. It's not criminal. And that's how a not guilty verdict could be good for Alec Baldwin. But could be bad for Alec Baldwin if everybody starts to think he's the ultimate problem. He held the gun. He pulled the trigger. He should have known. He should have done that last check regardless of what somebody said to him. And if Hannah Gutierrez Reed is not guilty, maybe that jury, which again will be a different jury than has Alec Baldwin's case, but a not guilty verdict could be very bad for him if it turns out that most people think he is the one ultimately responsible. So this is not going to be a cut and dry case. This is not going to be an easy thing where one's guilty, the other's guilty. If one's not guilty, the other's not guilty. There's a lot of moving parts. I think there's going to be a lot of similar testimony in the two trials, but there's also going to be a lot of a different testimony. So let me know in the comments if you guys want me to follow this trial starting next week. It seems like there's been a lot of talk and a lot of following this over the years. If you're interested, I'll follow it. If not, we'll move on to something else because there's plenty of other things going on that I'm looking forward to diving into starting next week. This week is going to be kind of me getting my bearings, doing some videos, hanging out with some lives, answering some questions. I think John said he wants to do a members only just Discord special where we talk about, you know, how it's used and how we can use it more and just do kind of a refresher because a lot of people still have questions about that. Brandy asked, do dummy bullets look noticeably different than live bullets? We did a whole video on it with an expert. Most experts say yes, that there's a lot of differences. The defense in the hearing today argued that there are not a lot of differences. That there are not a lot of differences. That's kind of the point. Dummy bullets are supposed to look and sound and feel like real bullets. So again, there's going to be a lot of expert testimony. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm just a lawyer. I talk to experts. I learn how to explain what they tell me. But lawyers rely on experts. And both sides are going to have a lot of expert testimony here that we're going to have to get through. Trish, why was live ammo even on the set? Well, the defense team has arguments as to who brought that live ammo on set and why this happened, and it wasn't Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's fault. The state's going to argue it was absolutely Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's fault, and partially because she was high and negligent. And that's how the ammo ended up on set. Annie, question, how would this be criminal versus civil? Is criminal negligence overriding a horrible accident? No, I mean, there's similar standards, but criminal is a higher level and a higher burden to prove it, because you have to prove that their negligence directly caused. Doesn't have to be the only cause, but it does have to directly cause the death. And can they prove that? That's going to be the big question. John, wasn't Baldwin one of the people putting up the money for this film? Yes, I believe so. Just thinking outside the box. Yes, I believe that is the case. I think he's connected in a lot of different ways and a lot of the different companies that may have screwed this up potentially. So we'll see. TR Finley, didn't the FBI have to rebuild the gun before they could test it? That would definitely make a difference in how I looked at this case. So I want to hear how it exactly comes out. I've heard they had to rebuild the gun. I heard they used a different gun. I heard they used the same gun, but then it was so damaged that the defense couldn't use and test the same gun, which to me would be problematic in a fair representation and testing of the evidence and the fair defense, and would be good cross-examination as to how the FBI tested it and did they do it the right way. Or was the gun also malfunctioning when Alec Baldwin was holding it, which again would not be his fault, arguably. Question, is this case going to be streamed online? I believe the answer is yes, but I'm not positive about that. Vicky, welcome to the membership crew. Daria said, live rounds were on set because they were using them to shoot props for realism for some scenes. I have read things, and again, that's why I like to wait till it comes out in trial. I have read things kind of on both sides of that. I don't know if all the testimony is going to agree that this was the reason they were on set. Katie, will the interview that Alec Baldwin did come in at trial? And if so, how mad are his lawyers that he did it? I don't know how mad his lawyers are. It's probably not pumped. I absolutely think it is going to come out in his trial. Maybe not Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's, but I think his trial. I agree, Daria. It's going to be really interesting to hear both sides of this and see what both sides think about this and how they think they can prove their case. All right. So that's an update as to where we're at. Gutierrez-Reed's trial is going next week. It's going to have a profound effect on Alec Baldwin's trial one way or the other. We're going to get an insight as to how the state's going to prove this case, how they're going to point all the fingers at Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, and then later on point all the fingers at Alec Baldwin. It happens lots of times when the states have co-defendants like this. But it's going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to following it. If you guys have questions and you think this is interesting, I think it's an interesting legal question because it's unusual, right? It's not the common criminal theme, although it feels that way with Gutierrez-Reed, Baldwin, two Crumblies, these involuntary manslaughter charges coming forward more often than they used to, at least in my opinion. But I appreciate you all joining me. Make sure you hit that like button on the way out. Make sure you subscribe to our page as well. We're continuing to grow, continuing to have fun with the subscribers. And I appreciate all you guys coming and joining me. I'll be back tomorrow with another live. I don't know what the content's going to be. If you see stuff pop up, if you're interested in stuff, hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at Tragos Law and at Lawyer You Know, so we can continue to bring the content that all the subscribers are interested in, because that's what we like to do on this channel. I appreciate you being here. Until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.